Screening review, Code Unknown. One of Haneke's more praised films, this is one of the more defining and demonstrative of Haneke's pictures, as we witness an anthology of sometimes serialized, always connected, vignettes which want to find the universals in the particulars in regards to then modern France, turn of the millennium Western Europe. Some of the most arresting scenes in Haneke's entire filmography, whether the film coherently or fluidly distills all of what it wants or perceives about its specific time and place, this is debatable, but Code Unknown is a highly watchable film, regardless of whether one deems Haneke's intent to be a success or not. It is innately beguiling and thought-provoking, and if it doesn't enable or sort of conjure thoughts in the viewer upon the film's conclusion, it may very well, over the next few days as they reflect upon the screening. I have to admit, I hadn't gotten enough sleep the night before, and I briefly nodded off. I don't know for how long, but I was awakened by a thundering of drumming, and so I feel as though my assessment of the screening was ruptured, although I could still appreciate the sum total of the cinematic experience. I had seen the film before, once or twice, in the context of my home, and I feel as though that Code Unknown, like maybe many films, may be best appreciated as an object which can be assessed and analysed, viewed at any time, its potential traits and positive qualities, and emanating throughout time like a still painting, rather than characteristics which must manifest and transmit effectively during a certain window of a runtime, like attempting to siphon the most effects out of a drug state as possible. As other films have attempted to contemplate in the early 21st century, be it David Lynch in Inland Empire, or Refn in Fear X, or Jarmusch in The Limits of Control, obscuring context from spaces may well be a more revealing window into naked pathos, divorced from the desensitizing and oversaturated repetitive experiences of imagination blocking surroundings, which assess there the subject's circumstances as familiar banality. When you sever sort of the context and the surroundings, and you sort of are forced as a viewer to sort of fill in the subject's sort of surrounding spaces with your own assumptions, in a sense, you get to sort of a greater core of the distinctiveness of their very particular circumstances within that frame, as opposed to the sort of normalizing, flatlining effect, which, you feel at any moment that you're awake. Whereas if someone had seen just a slice, if you see someone presenting themselves in a webcam for 5 seconds in a YouTube video, for example, you automatically fill in the gaps. And a good example is someone at a beach in an Instagram image. All of a sudden, the extrapolations can be immense. Versus if you had the sort of were actually distilled the clinical truth of that context. If you learned more about it, so suddenly something dissipates. And I think that's what's interesting about Code Unknown and some of these other films is they would show you these spaces in these interiors, and they would obfuscate wider context, which can de-romanticize the subject and the location, the space within that frame itself. Anyway, the finest of Haneke's films, I feel, is The Seventh Continent, although I also feel as though his priorities were rather creatively examined within the narrative schema of 2005's Caché, and I feel this way in regards to the editing schema of 2000's Code Unknown, which would be my plausible pick for Haneke's third or second best film. One of the best films of 2000, along with In the Mood for Love, Memento, The Circle, Snatch, Gojo, Spirit War Chronicle, Sexy Beast, and Unbreakable. As far as Haneke's other films go, I consider Benny's Video, 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance, and The Time of the Wolf to be really strong films. I have seen some of his works pre-Seventh Continent, but not in quite a while, and never any of them more than once. I think 97's The Castle is a pretty good picture. His last two features, Amour and Happy End, I both like overall. Happy End I think is quite interesting as a presumed final feature. I consider White Ribbon to have chilling cinematography, but to not be one of the most interesting films he has made. I'd say The Piano Teacher is one of the less interesting films of his. And I detest the Funny Games films. I don't see the purpose of them. I'm not impressed with them. Shocking Grandma is not a compelling cinematic endeavour to me. And if it had ambitious VFX, an immersive, nightmarish mood, or even something of interest to possibly say, I would grant that, if I see little of much fascination with either of those desperate, coyly amoral wastes of our time.